got one of the face management memories. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then I'll show you the MasterCard and stuff. I've been having that couch. Everybody taking 24.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to call my panelists to the couches, please. Isn't that great? All right, no, there's no falling asleep on the couch. No, I don't think so. So anyway, good afternoon, everybody. We are live streaming, and I know a number of people when they're like, oh, they're live streaming, we can just stay home and watch it on our computers. So that's kind of a bad habit we got into with COVID. But thank you all for being here and joining us this afternoon. My name is Andrea Miller. I'm going to be the moderator for this event. And if you're going, boy, or voice sounds strange, this is the incredibly improved voice over yesterday. I have a major case of laryngitis, so at least I can be heard. Our purpose today at this Democracy Town Hall is to talk about the importance of democracy, and we have 4 wonderful panelists who have contributed very much to democracy here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So we're talking, or the Freedom to Vote Act is going to resolve a lot of issues that many, many states are facing. Due to the incredible work of Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, the Commonwealth of Virginia is not experiencing what so many other southern states are. And we are shining as that beacon of hope, if you will, of what they can be with some more democracy. So rather than listening to me croak up here, all right, like I said, this is the improved voice. I will do very, very short introductions and then allow you to listen to our wonderful panelists. So we will begin our afternoon with Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, who as a Virginia delegate and as our Virginia State Senate paved the way for so many important things that happened in Virginia. Virginia was the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Yay! And Virginia is the only southern state, and probably one of the very few states, where we have our own version of parts of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and also parts of the Freedom to Vote Act. So with that, I give you Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan.
Good morning. It is great to be back in Richmond, particularly. It's a little chaotic in Washington. Just a little bit. And I am enjoying it. I will enjoy it a lot more when we're in the majority, because when we are the majority, the first thing we're going to do is pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Act. And they have been given they will be given again House Bill 1. The first 10 bills are reserved for the majority, and the Speaker decides what gets what. And we already know that when Hakeem Jeffries is the Speaker, that either the John Lewis Act or the Freedom to Vote Act will be number 1 and the other will be number 2. So get into the questions because I'm not going to do that. But as you heard, I spent 18 years in the General Assembly. My very first bill was a bill related to voting that made it easier to vote by provisional ballot rather than often if you went and you either were at you moved and they didn't have you in the list. It was hard to vote provisionally. You just didn't get to vote at all. And so the very first bill I ever passed made it easier to vote provisionally if you needed to. And then my second to the last year was when we passed the Voting Rights Act of Virginia, which took the elements of the National Voting Rights Act and the John Lewis Act and put them in Virginia law. And as you heard, we are the first state in the South, the only state in the South to have that. But it's one of the strongest voting rights acts in the country, and it's appropriate that Virginia do that because we were the birthplace of American democracy, but we also were the birthplace of American slavery. And we've been on the right side and the wrong side of history so many times. I'm very proud that in 2020 and 2021, on so many issues, we were not only on the right side of history, but we were leading the way in the South. So we'll get more into that in a little bit, but just very glad to be with you all this morning.
Yes, thank you very much, Congresswoman McClellan. Now, we have a new delegate that was elected in November of last year. Yes, Virginia had an election in 2023. We love elections. We have them every year. So Delegate Gardner, while being new to actually being a member of the General Assembly, was not new to advocating for the people that were in her community. She served on numerous boards uplifting people in the community who were forgotten and downtrodden. She had an interesting bill that I really enjoyed this year that would have our constitutional officers run with party identification. Because right now, when people run for various offices, I want to call it the Attorney General, or whatever the county equivalent is, it's a non-partisan office, and we all know, no, it isn't really. So, Delegate Gardner, your statement, please.
Good afternoon. It's so good to see so many friendly faces out there. And as our moderator said, I am a new or a freshman delegate, but I am not new to this. And I would just like to add a little commentary. I hope that I will become half the delegate that Congresswoman McClellan was, because she got a lot of stuff done, and that's my goal in the General Assembly. My bill was House Bill 176, and it was the first bill I actually filed, and my district is 76, so that's interesting that the bill number ended up being 176, from Chesterfield County. And as you know, or may not know, I am the first Democrat to ever be elected to represent just Chesterfield County. And added to that, I am also the first woman or the first person of color to ever represent just Chesterfield County. So it was really important to me, after working the polls for not just last election year, many election years, where voters would come out and say, I don't know who to vote for, because there were no D's or R's behind the non-constitutional offices. And those offices include Commonwealth's Attorney, it includes Sheriff, it includes the Commissioner of the Revenue, it includes the Treasurer, it includes Soil and Water, all those things that affect our daily lives every day. So a lot of people who were in opposition to the bill would say, well, doing that makes us more divided and more partisan. However, the reason I did that is because after working on election day, every poll in my district, after working early vote, I saw people struggle when they come in and say, I don't know who to vote for. Because it's really important for people to vote for those people who they feel like are going to follow the agenda that's important to them. And that's why it's important for them to know. So for me, this was more of a voter transparency thing, because I think voters have the right to know who they're voting for. And so instead of trying to make it all partisan, my bill actually said that if you choose to run in a partisan primary, or if you choose to be the nominee of a party, then you need to have that designation on you. And for those people who say, well, we're just nonpartisan, we represent everybody, then you don't have to choose that. But what I saw was that people were actually running in primaries, and they were actually getting the official nominee, but they didn't want people to know that they were a Republican or a Democrat. And so after talking to a lot of them, it just seemed like to me, it was more of incumbent protection. You wanted to have your cake, they needed to. And I just think it's important for voters to know who they're voting for. If you want to be that nonpartisan person, then don't choose to run under a party banner. And it didn't even include the people who got the endorsement. It was just those people who chose to run as a partisan. So, yes.
Did that include school board?
It did not, because that's under a separate code. So I thought I'd take a small bite of the apple first. And then, go back and do the other part. So unfortunately, it failed. It got out of committee, and because the treasurers and the commissioners of revenues had big lobbyists, then they got their lobbyists mobilized. I even got a visit from the Democratic Party of Virginia saying, don't you want to carry this bill over? But I did not. I stuck it all the way through, but it still failed by 3 votes. And believe me, it's coming back.
Right, I was going to say, we'll be working on that next year. Thank you so much, Delegate Gardner. Now, one of my favorite activists, Richard Walker. I have known Richard for, 10, 12 years, and there is no voice that has been more consistent and that has been stronger, advocating for returning citizens and getting their full rights of citizenship, the right to vote back. Now, what we've been working on in Virginia, and it feels like forever, has been a constitutional amendment that would basically say, upon release from prison, you will be able to get your voting rights back. Richard has taken a different and very interesting tactic on solving that problem. So I give you Richard Walker, Bridging the Gap in Virginia.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization, Bridging the Gap in Virginia, where we advocate for criminal justice reform, prison reform, and environmental justice. I've been involved in the Commonwealth of Virginia after coming out of incarceration and finding out that Virginia took my right from me. And that made me angry. This was in 2012. I came home from prison in 2005. And then I found out of the process of what has to happen in order to get my rights restored. That I had to do a 12-page led help started by LeVar Stoney at the time when he was the secretary. So the governor did what he did to help individuals get their rights restored automatically. Beyond the court cases, it happened. But however, they did not give a route as to how to get the word out to individuals that would fall under that would have gotten their rights restored by the governor. So I partnered with another organization, a good friend of mine, Lily Branch Kennedy, and we created what was called the Mobile Justice Tool. We went throughout the entire state of Virginia, mobilizing individual communities to help them pass the word or help individuals get their rights restored. You know, I've probably assisted well over 10,000 individuals during the time period of getting their rights back. You know, Virginia is a tough state, but I feel the change. I see the change. You know, I see what's going on right now in the General Assembly, that a lot of stuff is getting changed, you know. So I don't know how much longer I'm supposed to speak, and I didn't look at the questions. I heard the delegates went on and on and on, but I think I'll cut mine short.
All right, thank you, Richard. One of the things they don't really advertise about the Freedom to Vote Act is that it includes the Democracy Restoration Act, so that at the federal level, anyone convicted of a felony would automatically be eligible to register and vote upon release from prison. Now, our next guest, Mr. Elijah Lee, was recommended to me by a young man that started working for us when he was 16 years old. His name is Justin Messler. Justin is now in charge of campus organizing for a group called Voters of Tomorrow. He said, there is a young man in Virginia that you must have on your panel addressing voting and the motivation of young people, and that is Elijah Lee. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Elijah Lee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So, like our moderator said, my name is Elijah Lee, and I'm a 16-year-old community activist, and I'm the co-president of the Virginia chapter of Voters of Tomorrow, as well as I work in several other capacities, and all of my work is dedicated simply to the empowerment of young people. And there's a variety of ways that I've been really lucky to be able to work and work in this space. However, a lot of the work that, especially the work that influences me here on today, is our work when it comes down to mobilizing youth voters. I'm really proud to say that Voters of Tomorrow has been able to register over 300 young people to vote in Virginia elections. And that may not sound like a lot, but we've seen elections historically come down to 200 votes, we've seen them come down to 100 votes, and we've seen them come down to even 75 votes. And so I think I'm really, really proud to say—
Elijah, we've seen them come down to 1 vote.
And so that's why I think it's so important that we are able to mobilize our young people. I don't think I have to tell you that our young people are fired up, right? We're ready to go. We're ready to continue the legacy of the amazing people that I share this panel with. And so I know for a fact so much of my work has come down to finding new and innovative ways, new and innovative solutions when it comes down to uplifting and amplifying the voices of our young people. And so I'm excited to be on this panel today, not only so I can talk more about the power of young people, but also so we can continue to make that progress that my fellow panelists have talked about.
And thank you so very, very much. All right, now, I've prepared a series of questions for our panelists, so we'll go through those. And if we have a little bit of time at the end, we might be able to do, this is a big mic, questions from the audience. First question for Congresswoman McClellan. Your Virginia Voting Rights Act made Virginia not one of the most progressive states in the country, definitely the most progressive state in the South. What in Virginia's past encouraged you to put forth this bold piece of legislation?
The short answer is the history of voting rights in Virginia from day one in 1607. And rather than going through all that, I will say I did write an article for a public policy journal, University of Richmond, that followed the history of voting rights in Virginia. And from the first vote ever held in 1607 in Jamestown, they voted for who would be sort of the titular head of the colony, and voter suppression was involved because John Smith got on everybody's nerves, and they made sure that he did not get to vote. So from day one, in Virginia, there was some form of voter suppression. And after the Civil War, when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed, and in 1869, the first black men voted in Virginia and all across the South. And we had sort of the glory days of black men elected to office at every level. We had 22 who served in the Constitutional Convention that created the Constitution that allowed Virginia to be brought back into the Union. We had over 100 who served in the General Assembly during Reconstruction. And then when Reconstruction ended, and the old power structure of the former Confederates came back, they wrote another Constitution in 1902. And I invite you, with a glass of wine or something stronger, to read the debates. They were very clear what they were going to do, and that was to, in E. Carter Glass's words, disenfranchise the darky. And they did that through three main ways. And they followed the model of Mississippi. And they knew with the 14th Amendment that they couldn't just outright say, we are going to disenfranchise black people. They knew they couldn't do that. But they were very creative in how they did it. By putting in place requirements for poll taxes, for literacy tests, for felony disenfranchisement. And at the same time that this was happening in Virginia, it was happening in Alabama, where my great-grandfather was. And he was a teacher. He was determined to register to vote. He had been organizing his community to register to vote. He was on a list of people that the registrar had, do not register these people to vote. He showed up. He was given a literacy test. He got all the questions right. The registrar turned to his assistant and said, I need more questions. This is the only time you'll ever hear me use this word, and it's a direct quote. And it is a direct quote. He said, I need more questions, because this nigger got them all right. My great-grandfather got those questions right. They said, well, Mr. Davis, you need to find 3 white men to vouch for your character, to be able to register to vote. He did. And he got his voter registration back because he had voted during Reconstruction. And he voted every year since. So all of that was fixed with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was gutted by the Supreme Court in the Shelby versus Davis decision that struck the linchpin of the Voting Rights Act was the pre-clearance requirement. That any state or locality that had a history of voter discrimination, intimidation, and suppression based on race or any other protected class had to have any changes to their voting laws pre-cleared by the Justice Department. And it was based on a formula. And the Supreme Court struck that section of the Voting Rights Act down. And then we saw a wave of voter suppression laws passed across the South, except in Virginia. In Virginia, we continue to pass laws to make it easier to vote. But seeing that Congress was not reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act, it had become a partisan issue. Every year that the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized, it was done so in a nonpartisan manner. But after Shelby, that changed. And so working with Marcia Price and Tran Nguyen, with New Virginia Majority and Brennan Center and a lot of activists, we took the Voting Rights Act of 1965, we looked at what was then the For the People Act, and what became the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Act. And we put those elements in Virginia law. And we strengthened our voter suppression, we strengthened our anti-intimidation laws. We put a version of preclearance in place. And we looked at what other states were doing. And even, California wasn't good enough. We said, we're going to make Virginia's Voting Rights Act the strongest in the country. Because again, voter suppression started here. We're going to make sure voter suppression ends here until Congress can fix it at the national level.
Thank you. Love that. Love that. I didn't know, so thank you very much for that personal history. Next, activists have pushed the Virginia governors to expand restoration of rights for decades. To takes a different tactic. Can you talk about this tactic and why you chose it?
Well, like I said, as I came out of prison as a convicted felon, and it was embedded in my family, through my grandparents and my parents, that we had went through. And as I stated earlier, when I came out of prison in 2005 and was told that I did not have the right to vote any longer, I became angry. So out of that came the organization Bridging the Gap in Virginia. Out of that came connections with persons such as Lily Branch Kennedy and others that, we decided that we were going to fight this. Bob McDonald got an epiphany in the middle of his sleep to realize that this was not right, to disenfranchise individuals, I'm currently a part of a lawsuit that makes it unconstitutional for the Commonwealth of Virginia to deny individuals their voting rights. It's called the Readmission Act. And Congresswoman, she kind of touched on it as well, that as a direct result of the Civil War, there were Confederates that wanted to be a part of the legislation. And that's where that Readmission Act came from, and they said that no one will be allowed to be able to vote or have presence in this legislature if they commit what was called a common law felony. That might have been in rape, that might have been incest, it might have been harm. Through any means going forward, Virginia is still in violation of that. So I'm excited about this, the loss on his response. So that gives me hope, because it wasn't no real quick way that he said, well, no, this is not going to go forth. We're not going to push this any further. So there's a whole bunch of organizations, and I see some folk that represent several of them, that we have been fighting this or be able to bring in the change the Constitution with an amendment. That individuals coming out, Northam, they saw it.